Well, welcome to this episode of TheSquare. This is actually part two of two episodes we're doing on design sprints. Today I'm joined with Robbie Good, who is the Director of Branded Environments, and Alexandra Ayres, who is a Project Design Manager and Senior Associate in the Phoenix Interior Studio. Thank you guys for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So, Alexandra, tell me a little bit about, why you are a designer.
It's a hard question, really, when you think about it. For me, it's really all about the people, and I think that's the easiest way to say it. What we do as designers really affects everybody in their everyday life, right? That interaction between people is all done by the way we've designed a space. And so it's really exciting that, I have an influence on a lot of that throughout most people's workplace.
Robbie, how about you? I mean, there's a lot of different career paths you can take. Why a designer?
I think for me, it's all about creative problem solving. I think that's always been an interest of mine. I remember like in third grade being very interested in logic, and there's something interesting about like the combination of the physical space and graphic design that becomes very much kind of a logic problem. Which is why I got into environmental graphics and signage and wayfinding in particular.
Awesome. All right. So give me a little background on this project. In fact, actually, before we do that, I'm going to play for our video audience a 30-second teaser that was put together for the result of this design competition, which was called Pera. Okay, so now that you've seen a little bit about what Pera is, tell me a little bit about this project. I mean, usually you're dealing with designing spaces, and this was actually designing an object.
Yeah, so it was really interesting. We were kind of chatting over Teams, and this opportunity, I believe actually Robbie posted it, this kind of hand sanitizer competition. So it was really kind of an interesting take. It was something different than what we've ever kind of done. And so a lot of people kind of chimed in and volunteered to be a part of this group. And that's really kind of, I think, how it started originally, and then just morphed into what it became.
Yeah, the competition got posted, and I just kind of spied it on my RSS feed, and it was like this weird, like kind of a picture looking thing that they were calling it the Fountain of Hygiene contest. And it's like, that's kind of interesting. And it kind of hit on some things we had been discussing on the Design Advocates channel. And, personally, I wasn't planning to really get all that involved, but, I think a group just sort of naturally coalesced around it, and just became an awesome project.
Well, so full disclosure, this was something that I found out about pretty early on. Was able to be a fly on the wall for a lot of the design discussions that you guys had. It was really interesting how quickly and how diverse the group was that worked on this, especially considering this all came about basically the week we were transitioning from everybody working in the office to working from home. Tell me a little bit about the different people on the team.
So I think there was a good range of diversity from different market sectors. And I think that was really, really unique, because typically you wouldn't gather probably all of these people together for one particular project. But we had interiors represented, so myself, and then branded environments, Robbie. We had Aviation, someone from Aviation, so again, kind of a different take on it. And then, of course, our Hugo advocates were a part of it, and of course Brandon joined in, as he said, a fly on the wall. So a very diverse group of people kind of coming together for this unique project.
So Robbie, when you saw this kind of come across your RSS feed, again, typically you're used to dealing with big spaces and graphics and wayfinding that is in a much larger scale. And this was for something, I think even from the very beginning was always concepted to be something like the size of a wristwatch. What was it that kind of attracted you to that?
Yeah, so I think for me, like I was probably the only one on the team that had worked with something that's on a scale, remotely close to this. A sign, maybe the smaller ones are 8x8, 4x8, something like that. And I think compared to like Thomas on our team who'd been working on airports and these like just massive venues, I think it was just a huge jump. And I know he in particular had some interesting insights as far as the scale goes. But I think it was fun. I feel like we all sort of were able to relate to, objects like the Apple Watch or just, even common sanitizers that are out on the marketplace, like the little plastic bottles that you can put on a keychain, or things that you can find in the store already. And we just sort of were trying to really wrap our heads around, okay, how can we make that better?
So, as you said, you had a diverse team. They were across different sectors and different states, different time zones. What were some of the challenges and benefits of that?
I would say probably challenges. I feel like we worked really well, so it's really hard to kind of think of some challenges. I would say probably time zones would probably be the only one of the challenges. Understanding that we have different people in different time zones, so accommodating to people's schedules accordingly. But honestly, I felt like we did pretty well that way in regards to the cons. But I think the pros that were really good was that I feel like everybody, if you're in an office, and let's say there's a couple people in, Dallas and a couple people in Phoenix, sometimes it's hard to speak up or get your voice heard. And here, I think because everybody is on this virtual platform, everybody has that quick, easy say-in. They could chime up when needed. So it's easier to just make your statement, so to speak, and whatever your point needs to be or your comment needs to be, it's easily heard, I would say.
Yeah, I think we had, there was a nice commonality because everybody was remote. I think it would have been a different story if, Thomas and Alex had been like, in the Phoenix office and we had been in the Dallas office. Like, I think it would have been more interesting from like a charrette perspective and being able to like actually be in person and sketch and think through that. I think that was one of the biggest challenges, was figuring out like, how do we sketch and charrette, on a Teams call. But, I think it worked out.
I will say it was funny. I think there were times, especially when Samantha and Tanya would get onto the Teams channel, and you could look at it at lunch, right, and kind of get caught up, and then by 2:00 somebody will have had an idea where one other person was on, and all of a sudden like there's this whole other thread. But I do think the team did a really good job of like being mindful that it's a whole team of people and taking feedback and making sure it didn't get too off the rails in one direction or the other without getting everybody's input. So tell me a little bit, with the design sprints and quick designs, one of the things that we talked about in the earlier episode was balancing being thorough with being relevant and having this idea of doing design well, but doing it in a very short amount of time. Tell me a little bit about, Robbie, some of those challenges and how you think you struck that balance.
Yeah, I think there were definitely in that short time frame, you really have to prioritize and think through. Okay, we're not going to have this detail worked out completely. Let's just get it on the board. Let's have it look nice. Let's put the effort into just the visual, and we don't necessarily need to work out every single mechanic and every single detail. And that's actually really hard to do, especially I think in our industry. But I think it's nice because you just sort of you focus on what matters, and particularly in a competition, I feel like it's so visual. And I guess it's hard to say how the judges are going to look at things like that. Would they have liked to see more detail? I'm not sure, but I think it was just an extremely fun creative process to work that way. And, in the end, we end up with a really interesting product.
So, Alexandra, one of the things that was kind of interesting about this competition is there was an initial deadline where you had just a week to do everything, the design, the submission of an A4 description. We added onto that because we're never satisfied with what's required, a 30-second animation. And then they gave an extra week, basically, after that. How do you think the design progressed or changed to the betterment or to the worse in that extra week?
I think definitely for the betterment. I think at that point in time, we had a solid design and concept. And so that last little bit of the week, we were able to kind of do those fine-tune kind of elements. Like Robbie said, we didn't want to get too much in the weeds. And I think when you have too much time, sometimes you can do that. But I think it was just enough time to kind of get us to fine-tune and finesse some of those key elements that were really important to kind of make it the submission that it needed to be.
Was there an element of, again, to put context around this, we were in the middle of transitioning from what is a typical work environment to a home work environment. There's also the human side of checking in on family and wanting to make sure that we're, contributing to stay at home and being safe. Was there an element of being able to, through all of, the potential unknowns, being able to be part of a solution?
Yeah, I think it certainly struck a different chord. I mean, I think if you were doing any other design competition, it maybe wouldn't have quite as much meaning. But I think the fact that we all felt like we were contributing something and doing something to, help the cause. And it was, honestly, as we talked through it, we're like, God, I'd really love to have one of these right now. This would be so useful.
I agree with that. I think that's what, and for me, was my join to the group. It was kind of this, how can we basically change the way we look at something that's pretty typical? And I thought that was a really interesting take for me. So that's one of the reasons why I joined the team. But I agree with Robbie. Now my son, who is obviously always all around, he's like keeps on asking me about Pera. He's like, Mom, so when is it going to happen? He's like, is it going to be in production? And I'm like, slow down. But I think people are really, we look for a solution, and I think we really thought about it really logically and how it could really come to fruition. And I think that was really key too.
All right, so then, Alexandra, tell me, because there's a lot of different features, even in concept, to Pera. What was one of your favorite features?
One of my favorite features. So I would say I really liked the thought process of incorporating like the light, like the washing the hands, because it's not only, a hand sanitizer, but I think the whole importance of it is to retrain the thought of how we not only sanitize, but like clean properly our hands. And I think that's really important because you never realize like how not long you washed your hands before this time period. Because I know every now and then, like I'm counting. So that was kind of a really nice feature. And I think for all ages, that little tiny thing would really help, making sure that something like this pandemic could maybe have not been escalated as high as it could have.
Yeah. Robbie, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think the light component was something that I continually thought about every time I washed my hands. Just like imagining in my head this light going around. I think aside from that, the gesture, I feel like we put a lot of thought into what the gesture would be. How would this thing be activated? Because I think right away that was kind of one of those non-negotiables of like, this thing has got to be gesture activated. We can't have like a button or something. Like it's got to be something that's high tech. And so we started thinking about it, and I honestly don't remember how it developed, but we came up with this idea of this kind of circular motion like that. And so we decided that's the Pera dance. And so we were saying we needed like a little video of people doing the Pera dance.
Coming soon to a YouTube channel near you, the Pera dance.
Exactly. That's going to be part 3 of this episode.
Got it. All right. So, how how has this changed, how you approach kind of everyday projects, if you will, more of the everyday projects that aren't quick design? How does this experience change how you approach those or work in those?
I think for me, it's just understanding, right, that design does benefit from a time frame, right? I think that's really important, to make sure you're not designing too much, because sometimes as designers, we can do that. If you give us the time, we definitely will take it. But understanding that sometimes, if you put yourself in a parameter of a certain time frame, you could come up with a really great idea. I think that was really key. But the other thing I think was collaboration. This showed us how we can collaborate on so many different platforms, I think, which I think was really important. So not only for people who are not in the same office, but if I'm home with a sick kid but still need to work, this is definitely something that is still doable in our day-to-day life. So,
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest trap that we can fall into as designers is spinning our wheels when we have too much time. And so I do think it's really important to, challenge yourself every once in a while to just kind of like run through and knock something out in, a week's time, just to kind of really nail down. A lot of designers will say that like your first idea, that gut kind of instinct is the best idea. And sometimes it's not, but I think when you're challenged with that short time frame, you sort of like run with that gut idea and just you can make that idea the best possible concept it can be. So I think there's an advantage to that, and not just kind of continually going through and okay, well, what about this concept and this concept and this concept? I think even with clients, like you don't want to give them too many concepts, because then it just makes their brain explode. So I think it's a good practice.
Well, okay, then Robbie, just to start to wrap this up, and it's an element of not only design sprints, but just in general, we're never dragging our feet on the design process when we've got a project. But with quick deadlines, you have to have quick decisions. How do you think? What do you think the best practices are for a team in dealing with conflicting ideas, but in a speedy manner?
I think it's important to have that period of time where you're allowing everybody to throw something at the wall and not reject anything too quickly, but just sort of like there could be multiple things that the team has brought up, and you can, especially in a short period of time, like a charrette or a brainstorm or something like that, start to piece those things together and weave them into a really solid design. So I think collaboration and just openness to ideas and not being quick to squash anything is very important.
Alexandra, anything to add?
I would it's along the same lines. I think one of the really important things is to make sure that all of your team members are heard, which I think is really important. Just as a designer, you want your opinion, your ideas to be able to be laid out on the table, or else if they're not heard, then you start kind of retracting those and not sharing as much. So you want to make sure that people on your team have the ability to be heard, and I think that's really important. And like Robbie said, what ends up happening is sometimes you morph multiple ideas into one, which then just becomes a more solid design concept.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for joining us and for kind of giving us a behind-the-scenes look into Pera. For those of you that are both on the audio and the video side, if you look in the description below, you'll get to see a link to paraware.com where you can kind of take a look at this for yourself. And for those of you on the video side, you've been able to see some of the different shots of Pera in action. So thank you guys again both for joining us. Thank you for listening to this episode of TheSquare, and we'll catch you next time.